You know, yesterday, heard a lot of smart entrepreneurial thinking, kind of looking into the future. Talked about going into space. You know, all of us are going to be able to take a ride into space if we want. Mark Wagner showed a video that kind of showed some amazing technology that, if you didn't know better, it looked like science fiction, but because of what's happened in the last 10 years, it looked like, hey, when can I get one of those? The screen that you held up and could see what used to live on the planet just by putting that program in your see-through pad. And Will.i.am had some idea about how the refrigerator was going to be the center of our digital life or something. I didn't quite understand that one, but but this looking into the future thing, I got a close-up, amazing 30-year journey watching somebody who could see into the future and basically changed everything and basically delivered all the things that we're sitting at our tables with today, all the reasons that we're kind of able to predict the future, what Alec just said about the, you know, the democratization of this technology, so it's now power in the hands of the many. That's something this kid, Steve Jobs, saw when I met him. He was 25 years old when I met Steve. And he was already just this passionate, intense, you know. He and Wozniak invented this thing called a personal computer. Wozniak was just kind of into it for the hobby deal. Steve looked at it and said, this is going to change everything. This is what I believe this technology should be. And that was his passion when he's not 30 yet, but I like this picture because we both have hair. But when he was 25 years old, he had this intensity and this passion and this way of seeing into the future and imagining what he could do, what we could do if this technology was truly democratized, if we had this tool at our disposal. The other thing Steve loved besides technology and his vision for it was very interesting. He loved brands. He grew up admiring Sony and Polaroid because they were kind of making cool technology, but then they did kind of branding that he admired. He knew the story of Akio Morita changing the name of, the Tokyo Electronics Company to Sony because it was a charming, kind of fun, sunny, nice name. And I believe the reason Apple is called Apple was a little bit aligned to that model. You know, there's a bunch of legends about he was a hippie and he lived in apple orchards and he'd eat apples and that's how he got the idea for the name, or he was eating an apple with Wozniak in a garage. I think, even though I'm sure he didn't think it through, just his intuition told him that he was going to introduce the world to technology that was going to change everyone's life and do special things, but at the same time it was going to be new and it was going to be scary and people weren't going to kind of know what to do with a computer or if they even needed one. So he thought, Apple, maybe if it's named something non-threatening, something likable, something you can trust. I think he intuitively understood that that was going to be a more graceful way for people to come to this technology that he believed was going to be so amazing and change our lives. He loved brands and he loved the idea of how brands lived out in our culture. And in the early days, it was kind of this monologue. Brands were kind of speaking to us. Now we have this dialogue with brands, but brands are part of our culture. And the good ones, the smart ones, the interesting ones, actually become part of our lives in ways. So Steve, one of the amazing things he taught me early on was everything a brand does is an ad. You know, ads, again, back then were a TV commercial or a billboard, but Steve figured out that every way a brand touches you is a message, and it's either a positive message or it's a in a message that kind of contradicts what you thought about the brand. So from the very beginning, packaging, we helped write the manuals for Macintosh because he didn't want them to be written in technical jargon by technical writers. He wanted them to be written in English so human beings could figure out how to use the technology. As you know today, packaging is one of the most eloquent things that Apple does. When you open an Apple product, it's this amazing, joyous experience that's as powerful as any ad. And as you know, the Apple Store, I told Steve, it's probably the best ad Apple ever did. You can walk into that brand and touch it and feel it and get its energy back from the kids that work there. But so this young entrepreneur who could kind of look into the future and kind of see two horizons past what most of us could see, really believed that he had to make this technology accessible to everybody and anybody. And the first Macintosh was a pretty big moment, because up until then, PCs were just kind of gaining momentum, and IBM had come into the category. But when I think back to 1984 when we launched Macintosh, it was the introduction of graphical interface, the mouse, touching things on a screen, which we now do with our fingers, and typography and creativity built into the operating system. The story I love to tell is that everything that we did to launch Macintosh, every media form that it took, is now done differently because of Macintosh. So I need to share with you a couple of films, because I got a kind of a tight window. I usually tell these stories until they throw me off, but I better hurry up. Steve left, did Pixar in his spare time, came back, and we did Think Different to buy him some time, and then he invented products that changed all of our lives. So here's a little history from 1984 to one of the last days Steve was seen publicly. I got to go on that amazing journey with that guy who truly could see the future. He was, in my mind, the ultimate entrepreneur and also a technology visionary. So all of you who aspire to that, this guy should be your role model. I'm going to end with one last film. When we came back, Apple was almost out of business, and Steve called me and asked if I could join him in trying to rebuild. And we invented a thing called Think Different. It was a message that had to buy us some time so we could create the products that ultimately you all know he and they created. But this commercial became very important to him. It was a celebration of the values of Apple, his love and admiration for people who had vision, who looked into the future and tried to change the world. A commercial called Here's to the Crazy Ones. The words to that commercial became very important to both of us. Make a long story short, I tried to convince him to be the voice on that commercial, and he naturally called me the next morning after I had argued with him way into the night and said, Lee, we've got to go with the Richard Dreyfuss, who was the voice that was actually on it. Because if people think this is about me and not about Apple, then we'll have blown everything. And I'm going, yeah, that's why you're the genius, and I'm just the ad guy. Anyway, I would like to share with you, though, Here's to the Crazy Ones with Steve Jobs' voice on it, because he believed this.